Since its launch back in 2016, the Boss Katana has very much become a modern classic guitar amp. It's loved by players across the board for its versatility, incredible sounds, and responsive playing feel. Back in 2019, we got the Mark II version, and today we're taking a look at the Gen 3, which is the latest version of the Katana amp range. We've got the 50 and the 100 here with us today, but all of the amps in the range have been updated. Nothing's been taken away. This is still very much the Boss Katana that we know and love, but the Boss engineers have just managed to tweak things to make it even better and add a few more features that players have been asking for over the years. There's no denying that the Boss Katana range have always sounded fantastic, but for the Gen 3 they've redesigned the core sound engine to make it sound and feel even better, whether you're playing it live or recording direct. We're not going to spend today doing a shootout between the new Gen 3 and the older versions, though I'm sure there'll be plenty of YouTube channels that'll be doing that. But as somebody who's played the Katanas all through the lifespan, I was genuinely impressed with how much more open and alive the Gen 3 sounds. There's more kind of sparkle in the top end and a bit more grunt in the low end there. To take advantage of these improvements, we've got a brand new contour control in the EQ section of the amp. This is accessible from the panel on the Katana 100 and up, but it is there in the software as well on the Katana 50. And this functions as a kind of frequency shift, so it really lets you tailor the responsiveness of the amp to your preferences and also the rooms that you're playing in. So let's give it a try. We've got 4 different settings effectively. So there's the contour control off, and then in typical Katana fashion, we've got a green mode, a red mode, and a yellow mode. So we'll just play through each one. So contour control off first. Green mode. Red mode. So that one really felt instantly more kind of mid-scooped. And finally the yellow mode there. So this is quite a powerful tool to just make kind of global adjustments to your EQ range and really get specific with how you want the amp to sound in the room. We also get a couple of extra features on here. So we get a cabinet resonance switch, again, available from the panel on the Katana 100 and up, but it's in the software on the 52. So that lets you tell kind of how much air the amp is moving. So we've got a vintage mode, a modern mode, and a deep mode, which are all fairly self-explanatory. We also get a solo switch on there as well. So when you really need to cut through a mix, maybe it's time to actually step up and do a big solo, that's there on the panel, again, on the Katana 100 and up, it's there for you. Another thing that I've really noticed about the Gen 3 range is how much it actually lets the guitar's voice come through the amp. So obviously playing a Les Paul here, it's going to sound big and thick and whatever. But I was playing this Mustang earlier and I really noticed how much the kind of wiriness of the single coil pickups and everything really translated through the amp, which is what you want really from a guitar amp, isn't it? We need it to translate the sound of the instrument that we've chosen and do its thing to that. We don't want to just mush everything into one sound. None of this is to say that obviously your old Katana models are suddenly going to sound terrible. They're not. They're great sounding amps. But maybe if you've got one of the older Katanas, one of the original models, or even one of the Mark IIs, might be just time to give one of the Gen 3 range a go. Worth mentioning as well, another upgrade on the Gen 3 range. If you need to use headphones with these amps, the headphone output is now stereo. Previously, it was always mono, so now we've got proper stereo goodness going on there. So if you want ping pong delays or anything like that, that's all there for you when you have to play nice and quiet. Next big upgrade on the Gen 3 is a brand new amp type called Pushed. Now this new amp type aims to hit what for me is the holy grail of guitar amp tone, which is that blurry line between clean and overdriven sound, which you really get typically from old single channel valve amps that have been run on the edge of breakup. The great thing about this is that it lets you control the amp and also your sound from the guitar itself, either using your volume control to kind of wind down for a clean sound and then turn it up for a big dirty sound, or even just with your technique. So pick lightly and you'll get the cleaner sound, and then you can really dig in and get some grit going. So when you've got an amp that can do this, the amp itself is kind of responding organically to your playing and becoming as much of an instrument as the guitar itself. A lot of digital emulations, modelers, whatever you want to call them, they really struggle with this kind of sound. They tend to sound brilliant clean and they sound brilliant overdriven, but that in-between sort of sound, I don't know, maybe not so much. Tends to be because they're basically a snapshot of a particular guitar tone, so they don't respond in the same way that a true amplifier does, and they tend to be quite static in response to your playing. The Katana has always been quite different in this aspect because it's not a modelling amp. It's not trying to be a perfect emulation of any particular vintage valve amp or anything like that. It's just a really good sounding guitar amp with a bunch of different voices and styles in it. So for me, they're what I would consider a proper amp. And these two new pushed voicings, because we get the amp itself and a variation on it, do this sound really very well. So let's have a play through it. So we're just on the push channel now. I'm running the gain at about 50%. There's a little bit of spring reverb on there. EQ's pretty much flat. So we'll just hear how that amp itself sounds with just responding to different playing styles. So I'll do little bits of controlling it with my fingers, control it with the volume pot, and we'll see how it sounds with the Les Paul. So for me to be able to get all of those sounds out of one channel of an amp that doesn't have valves in it is really quite incredible. We're going to try it with the Mustang now, so we've got something that's got single coils on it as well, so we'll give that a go. Now what you'll probably hear, now that I've moved over the Mustang, is how much lower gain the amp sounds, because obviously it's only getting a single coil pickup through it instead of quite a high output humbucker. So that just shows you how much this new pushed amp is responding to the guitar itself, not so much, you know, what's going on inside the amp. So as I say, you can hear there with the Mustang how much the amp is reliant on the guitar to get those sounds through. And like I say, with the Mustang, you really hear how much you can hear the guitar. You can hear the wiriness of those single coils through the amp, which for me, the previous versions of Katana would do that, but this just is at a whole new level. There's so much more the amp sounds so much more alive and open, which is really, really interesting. Obviously, the Gen 3 Katana, as with the other Katanas, it's loaded with Boss effects. So basically any effects pedal that you can think of, it's in the amp there. So you don't need to be using a board full of effects to get the most out of these amps. But that said, this new pushed sound, I feel, makes a really good pedal platform because it has that level of responsiveness that you'd expect from a proper amp. So on the floor here, I've just got a standard Boss SD1 Super Overdrive. It's just set up in that kind of standard style. So the level's quite high, gain's quite low, tone's somewhere in the middle. And I just thought it was worthwhile showing you how the amp responds to a pedal, which you don't necessarily need to use. Like I say, all these effects are built into the amp anyway. But if you just wanted to set this amp on that push channel and run your pedal board in front of it, you absolutely can. So this without the pedal on. Kick it in. I just can't get over how organic that sounds. I'm not used to effectively digital amps, or whatever you want to call them, having that level of responsiveness to an analog pedal in front of it. Typically, they don't really sound that great. This sounds like a great amp with a great pedal in front of it. Because I'm used to running valve amps, I would always kind of go for that pushed sound when I'm playing on a earlier Katana. What I would tend to do would either be to run the clean voicing and run the gain high on that, or run the crunch voicing and run the gain really low on that. Always got me sort of somewhere in the ballpark of where I wanted to be, but for me, this really ticks that box. The last big upgrade that we're going to look at today is that we finally get Bluetooth connectivity in the new Katana Gen 3 range. So these new amps are compatible with the Boss BT Dual Bluetooth adapter, which they've been using for a while now on a bunch of different products. This means that you can stream audio through the amp, so whether you want to play along to backing tracks or whatever, or stream through your headphones as well if you've got them plugged in. But most importantly, it means that we finally get a Bluetooth connected smartphone editor. The Katana range has always had a really good editor app, but you were very limited to using it on a desktop or a laptop, and you had to be connected to the amp physically by USB, which is fine if you were sort of tweaking sounds at home or in the studio or whatever. But if you're out on the move, or you're on stage, or you're in a rehearsal room, or whatever it is, smartphone app over Bluetooth is really the way to go. Just change your sounds on the fly so easily. It's a huge revelation for these new amps. The app itself is really super intuitive to use. If you're used to the Katana Go app or the Wazza Air app or anything like that, you're going to feel right at home here. Also gives you access to the library function on there, which means that you can actually add in your tones. If you've made tones on an earlier version of the Katana, so the original Katana or the Mark II, they're all going to be fully compatible with the Gen 3 amps. So if you've created your live sets on an older amp and you want to move to Gen 3, super easy to do. So that's a quick look at a few of the big upgrades for the Katana Gen 3 amps. I'm sure we'll see these continuing the success of the Katana range over the next few years. These two amps, the 100 and the 50, are available right now from launch of the Gen 3 range. The rest of the amps will be coming later in the year. and we'll no doubt be doing some videos on the additional features that come with those amps when they become available to us. So make sure you've liked and subscribed so you don't miss out on that. Cheers.